A reading from the Gospel of John. When it was evening on that day, the first day of the week, and the doors of the house where the disciples had met were locked for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Then the disciples rejoiced when they saw the Lord. Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I send you." When he had said this, he breathed on them and said to them, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven them. If you retain the sins of any, they are retained." But Thomas, who was called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands and put my finger in the mark of the nails and my hand in his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were again in the house, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were shut, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Do not doubt, but believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe." Now, Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that through believing you may have life in his name. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. You probably already know that there are certain four-letter words that you're probably not supposed to say in church. But did you know that there's also at least one five-letter word? At least that's the impression that I got growing up. Right alongside that standard list of profanities and swears and even those gentler euphemisms that were still frowned upon, there was this five-letter D word that was somehow worse than all of the other words combined. Now, what is this deadly, offending, forbidden word, I hear you ask? Well, to be honest, I'm still a little reluctant to say it out loud in church. But because I love you, the worst word that you could utter in the church of my youth was, are you ready? Doubt. Did you feel that? Do you feel that little shiver like someone just scraped a fork across a plate? That's why we don't say the word out loud. So in certain strains of American Christianity, doubt gets a bad rap. It's kind of billed as the antithesis of faith, a sign of a diminished relationship with Jesus, an emblem of worldliness at best and apostasy at worst. And who is the poster boy for this horrible, horrible D word? That's right, our friend Doubting Thomas. On Easter evening, quite literally in front of God and everybody, Thomas doubts the reality of the resurrection and is forever doomed to carry this legacy of skepticism and cynicism and disbelief and doubt. But what if doubt didn't have to be a five-letter word that sends shivers running down our spines? What if doubt is not the sum total of Thomas's legacy? What if we could just as easily speak of him not only as doubting Thomas, but as believing Thomas? In a poem about Thomas, our new friend, the poet Malcolm Guite, tweaks the apostle's legacy. Instead of focusing on his doubt, Guite names him, quote, "the courageous master of the awkward question, who spoke the words the others dared not say and cut through their evasion and abstraction." In other words, there's something good in Thomas's doubt, something liberating, something that has the power to get to the heart of things. In fact, we might even be so bold as to claim that Thomas's doubt is actually something holy. It took me a long time to unlearn that narrative of the horrible, cynical, skeptical, doubting Thomas. But when you're able to approach this text without all the baggage that modern Christians have attached to the word doubt, you start noticing some things. Things that have the power to redeem our experience of doubt. 3 things, as luck and rhetoric would have it. First, Thomas's doubt is not unique. Second, Thomas's doubt is not special. And third, and this is the most important part, Thomas's doubt is not wrong. Let us begin with what should be an unsurprising statement. Thomas's doubt is not unique. Do his questions remind you of anyone? I hear echoes of the psalmist. Hear these words from Psalm 88. But I, O Lord, I cry out to you. O Lord, why do you cast me off? Why do you hide your face from me? Or in Psalm 13, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? Presbyterian pastor named Robert Hawk says, perhaps in Thomas we hear one who prays like the psalmist prays, pleading for God's existence amid our groans, watching for God in the land parched with doubt, but no water. And let us not forget Thomas's fellow disciples. By calling him the doubter, we forget the doubts of the others. The disciples, in the first half of this morning's reading, seem to have ignored Mary Magdalene's Easter proclamation altogether, locked up in a room, afraid, until they see the risen Lord for themselves. Even Mary Magdalene, who is rightly venerated as the apostle to the apostles, has a moment where she is unsure about who Jesus is, believing him at first to be the gardener and asking him where the Roman officials have taken the corpse of her beloved rabbi. And what of us? Who among us has not longed for a sign, entertained a lingering question, has not wondered whether aloud or in the quiet corners of our own souls, is God really with me in all of this? Only, perhaps now when those questions arise, we know that we are not alone. We are in the company of psalmists and apostles and saints when those questions arise. When doubts linger, the proper response is not to shove them down or force them away or deny their existence in the name of some kind of unshakable faith. The proper response is to look around us, to know that we're in good company, that we're not alone. Because Thomas was not alone in his doubts. Neither are we. Thomas was not alone in his doubts. He was not unique. And that brings us to our second observation about Thomas. His doubt wasn't special. Now, Mark, I know that unique and special are generally synonyms, so put your red pencil away. I just couldn't find another way pithily to convey that Thomas's doubt is not of some remarkable quality. We've already seen how the disciples share Thomas's doubts until they see Jesus for themselves, but it's still worth noting that Thomas's doubt and their doubt are of the same quality and substance. Thomas's doubt is no better or worse or somehow more shameful than theirs. Thomas's doubt and our doubt is not special doubt. It is normal human doubt. And the fact that these apostles all together experienced doubts should remind us, by the way, that Thomas doesn't ask for anything special. He doesn't ask for anything that the others haven't already experienced. His exact words are, "Unless I see the marks of the nails in his hands and put my finger in the mark of the nails and my hand in his side, I will not believe." Now, the desire to touch Jesus' wounds is unique to Thomas, I will admit to that. But what had happened just a few verses prior? Jesus had showed up in this locked room, and he had shown the disciples the marks of his crucifixion. Thomas's language might be slightly more forceful in keeping with his character throughout John's gospel, but he's not asking for special treatment. He's asking to experience what everyone else had already experienced, a personal encounter with the risen Lord. This theme of personal encounter runs all the way through the Gospel of John, by the way. If you flip back all the way to chapter 1, you'll find this story that John tells of the very first Christian evangelist, a young man named Philip. Jesus is out walking one day, and he calls Philip to follow him, and Philip does without question. But then one day he goes back home, and he tells his friend Nathanael about this Messiah. And Nathanael responds with scorn. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? So faced with this challenge, what does Philip do? Does he try and assuage Nathanael's doubts with facts and logic and arguments that he learned from the very best apologetic seminars? No. He turns to Nathanael and he offers one simple phrase: "Come and see." For John, it's not enough to know a bunch of facts about Jesus. You actually have to know Jesus. This is not about checking off the right boxes or making sure that you're confessing the right doctrine. It's about having an actual experience of and with the Son of God. Thomas's doubts are not a manifestation of his unwillingness to believe. Rather, they suggest someone who absolutely wants to believe, but who also knows that it's not enough for him to merely assent to an idea. He has to see and know Jesus as he really is, in the crucified and risen flesh. And when Jesus finally makes himself known to Thomas, notice what he does not do. He does not chide Thomas for his doubts. Before Thomas can offer a single word in his defense, before he can stammer out any kind of apology, Jesus makes the first move, and he says to him what he has already said to the other disciples: "Peace be with you." Because Thomas's doubt is not special. It is the doubt common to all human beings who experience truths too vast for our minds to fully comprehend. Jesus' actions, by the way, bring us to our third observation, that Thomas's doubt is not wrong. Otherwise, Jesus certainly would have let him know in that moment. But rather than condemning him, Jesus pays attention to him. And when Thomas has the opportunity to experience what everybody else had already experienced, he then does something that nobody else has yet had the courage to do. But before we get to that part of the story, we have to return for just a moment to this legacy of doubt in American Christianity. This legacy that somehow doubt is the enemy of faith. This narrative that if you have doubts, you don't have faith, as if doubt is a kind of anti-faith that crowds out the presence of faith from within our beings. So we construct these elaborate systems of belief predicated upon the removal of doubt. If you will just say the prayer exactly like this, or if you will intellectually assent to each and every one of these ideas on this list, you can live your life free of doubt and full of faith. That's the narrative we often construct for ourselves. But what if, instead of treating doubt as alien to our experience of faith, we looked at Thomas and we thought about doubt as integral to our experience of faith, perhaps even the other side of the same coin. I mean, just look at Thomas and the other disciples. If ever there was a day for faith, surely it was the very first Easter Sunday with the proclamation of Mary Magdalene still ringing in their ears. But where are they on the evening of Easter? Locked away in a room, quiet and scared. On Easter morning, right there at the beginning of it all, there is doubt. We often have this idea that doubt comes from being overeducated or from a disconnect between our heads and our hearts. But if that was true, how does doubt show up less than 24 hours after the resurrection? On day one, doubt and faith are together, intertwined, encountering and transforming each other. Doubt doesn't come from a lack of faith, friends. It comes alongside faith. They twine and twist around each other like the twin strands of DNA or like two roots supporting the same beautiful plant. Thomas's story shows us that doubt is not the enemy of faith, but a part of, and perhaps even the very genesis of faith itself. Robert Warren, who is an Anglican priest in the city of Rome, says it this way: faith is discovered by needing it, and by using it, and by finding out that God makes it possible. Or, put slightly differently, faith and doubt are an awful lot like taking care of a baby. You didn't really think I'd make it through my first sermon as a new father without mentioning it, would you? So some of you will know instinctually what I'm talking about, and this might drag up some memories for you, so just be warned. There are these moments, sometime usually between 7 p.m. and 2 a.m., where our sweet, delightful, angelic daughter, Henley, decides she doesn't want to be sweet and angelic for a little while. As far as I am able to discern, her needs are all met. She is dry and fed and warm and safe. And she's just not happy. It happens to all of us. Maybe not to the same degree. But she just cries. And usually, as is the case, when these moments occur, I am in desperate need of sleep and kind of at the end of my rope. But somehow I drag myself out of bed and I pick her up from the bassinet and we walk through the darkened house. She likes to be up, not cradled. And we sway and we talk and we make soothing sounds, and sometimes we even go outside because Henley loves being outside. She is her mother's child. And sometimes, when this goes on for an hour, and because she loves being up, she's shrieking right into my ear, I hold her and I listen to her cry, and this question begins to bubble up in the back of my mind. I can't do anything for her right now. Am I really capable of taking care of this child? And in those moments, if you forced me to answer the question, I would have to say no. And I have wept more than once to think about it. But the key is to not stop walking, to not stop rocking and swaying, to not stop going outside. We muddle through it somehow. Eventually, she goes to sleep. Slightly later, eventually I go to sleep. We dry our eyes, and the pain of that doubt begins to slowly subside. I don't think it'll ever truly go away, but every iteration of these moments is a little bit easier. Every time I have a little bit more faith in myself and in her, and after 4.5 weeks with this little child, I'm starting to believe. It works with babies, and it works with God. Doubt does not kill our faith. It has the potential to nourish it. There in the dark, in the middle of the night, consumed by these thoughts, we begin to discover the truth. As we muddle through our doubts anyway, faith begins to grow. When we exercise our muscles and we push against resistance, they grow stronger. We look our doubts squarely in the eye. We name them. We ponder them. Like Jacob, we wrestle with them. And we might be surprised what shows up on the other side. Consider Thomas again. He's honest about his doubt. He has conditions upon which he will believe. But he doesn't just go home. He continues hanging out with these disciples for like at least 7 more days. He doesn't really seem to, believe, but he's still there. And then when Jesus shows up and offers him the thing that he needs, Thomas does something that nobody else in any gospel does. He says to him, "My Lord and my God." If you've never heard it before, mark it down right now. Thomas is the only person in any gospel to explicitly call Jesus God. When he gets what he needs for faith, he gets it. And he produces what is perhaps the most profound and succinct confession in the entire New Testament. Doubting Thomas. Believing Thomas. And he has another nickname, by the way. It's actually in our passage today. In Greek, they call him Didymus, which means the twin. And yet, no one in the entire New Testament mentions the identity of Thomas's twin. We have no idea who this twin was. And that causes me to wonder sometimes, maybe we should imagine that we collectively are Thomas's twin. Jesus does, after all, conclude this whole episode not by talking to Thomas, but by talking to us. Blessed are those who have not seen and have yet come to believe. That's you and me, perhaps Thomas's twin. Because twins are running out throughout this whole narrative. Faith and doubt, and now Thomas and us. This side of heaven, we may never have Thomas's chance to touch the wounds of the risen one. But we can see those resurrected wounds all around us in the rebuilding of burned churches and broken lives. 1 week after Easter, like Thomas, we have the responsibility to be honest about our doubts and to integrate them into our faith in healthy and holistic ways. And like Thomas, our twin experiences of faith and doubt somehow combine to produce that glorious confession. My Lord and my God. Like Thomas, we doubt. And like Thomas, we believe. Amen.